What's up guys, Jared here, and today we're going to talk about Greek myths and legends.
The Dioscuri, also known as Castor and Polydeuces, both in Roman and Greek mythology, were the sons of Zeus. They were the twin deities who saved some shipwrecked sailors and received sacrifices for favourable winds. They were the children of Leda, and either Zeus, the king of the gods, or Tyndareus, Leda's mortal husband and the king of Lacedaemon. According to the usual version, Castor was the child of Tyndareus and thus was mortal, while Polydeuces was the son of Zeus. Both of the twin brothers were fine equestrians, and Polydeuces was an unrivaled boxer. They took part in the hunting of the Caledonian bear and in the voyage of the Argo with the Argonauts to find the Golden Fleece. When their sister, Helen, was taken by Theseus, they invaded Attica and recovered her. They carried off the daughters of Leucippus, Phoebe, and Hilaria, and were confronted by Leucippus' nephews, Idas and Lynceus. But Castor was murdered by Idas, and Polydeuces killed Lynceus in retribution. Zeus killed Idas with a thunderbolt. Zeus then gave Polydeuces the choice between spending all his time on Olympus or giving half of his immortality to his mortal brother, so that they could alternate realms together and travel together. Polydeuces elected to share his immortality, but in one version of the story, they became the constellation Gemini. The twins Castor and Polydeuces were considered the protectors of hospitality, oaths, friendship, home, and sporting activities. They were both taught to protect warriors in battle and the sailors at sea, especially ones in life-threatening situations, and would often appear in person at such times. The twins were religiously important all across Greece, but most particularly in Peloponnese and Sparta, where warfare was fundamental to their culture. The legends even claim the twins were from the city, but they were also popular in Locris and in Athens. In the latter city they were known by the name Anaix, and given a temple on the slopes of the Acropolis, which was used as a mustering point for hoplites for the army. The Spartans especially revered both the twins, and their influence over their dual kingship was quite unique. The grave shrine at Therapne, across the Eurotas from Sparta, at the shrine known as the Menelaean, where Helen, Menelaus, Castor, and Polydeuces were all said to be buried. Lesser shrines dedicated to both Castor, Polydeuces, and Helen were also established all across Sparta, and the pear tree was regarded by the Spartans to be a sacred symbol of Castor and Polydeuces, and the images of twins were hung in its branches. The rite of Theoxenia, or god entertaining, was particularly associated with Castor and Polydeuces. The two gods were summoned to a table with food, whether it be at an individual's home or in the public places and religious places controlled by the state. So all in all, the Dioscuri were both important in Greek religion, mythology, and the Spartan identity, which all helped to build what Sparta became and forever shaped the Hellenic world.
Lycurgus was a descendant from Hercules, through the 11th generation, and he was the second prince in one of the two royal families of Sparta. When his father and older brother died, Lycurgus stood to inherit the kingdom. However, his deceased brother had left a pregnant wife, and her child, if a boy, will be the rightful heir to the kingdom if he survived birth. This woman came to Lycurgus and offered to abort the child if Lycurgus would make her queen. Lycurgus pretended to go along, and he convinced her not to risk her health by an abortion. He offered to do away with the child, and gave strict orders to bring the child to him as soon as he was born. One day, as Lycurgus was feasting with some judges of Sparta, a newborn boy was brought to him. "Men of Sparta," he said, taking his arms, "king born to us." Then he laid the boy down in the palace of honor, and named him Charlalus, which means joy of the people. Lycurgus got kicked out of Sparta, and he went to Crete. And when he was in Crete, he met Phallus the poet. Phallus made his living as a musician at banquets, but in reality, Phallus was a teacher of civilization. His beautiful songs persuaded men to be fair and to act as brothers to each other. Good men and the happiness they enjoyed were what Phallus' songs about. His listeners would forget about their feuds and become united in a common admiration of virtue. Eventually, Lycurgus persuaded Phallus to go to Sparta with his songs to prepare the people for the new way of life. Lycurgus carefully studied the forms of government in Crete, and he picked out what might have been useful to Sparta. He also travelled to Ionia to study the difference between the pleasure-loving Ionians and the sober Cretes, Satyrians. As a doctor studies the difference between sick and healthy. The Egyptians claim that Lycurgus visited them too, and that it was that was from the Egyptians that he got the idea of separating the military from the menial workers, thereby giving Sparta society its refinement and beauty. In the light of the conflicting opinions about Lycurgus held by the writers before 400 BC, there is some debate over whether he was a real man or a myth. Modern scholars are divided on whether or not Lycurgus was an actual person or a series of innovations that revolutionized Sparta over time. Among those who argue he was an actual person, there is also conjecture over when he might have lived, with the dates from the 9th to the 7th century BCE. The majority of scholars today favor the idea that Lycurgus was a series of revolutionary changes to the Spartan life that occurred over time. It is safe to say that not a single statement in Plutarch's narrative can be accepted with certainty, and that even the very existence of Lycurgus is strongly open to doubts. But the balance of probability is on the side of Lycurgus having actually lived and done his work for the benefit of Sparta. He was probably a primitive local god with a shrine by Herodotus, who was adopted by the Spartan hoplites. If there was a real Lycurgus, we know nothing of him. If Lycurgus did not exist, well, the Great Retcher, it is still significant because of the foundation of the Spartan constitution that appointed the two kings instead of the one, and limited the power. And the Great Retcher was especially concerned with the establishment of the Gerousia.
Authorised by the Australian Government, Canberra.
Spoken by J. Porters and A. Robbins.